Aliens Explored is a weekly podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a sceptical perspective whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
Who are those strange humanoid forms depicted on ancient cave paintings? Are the star people simply adherents to a New Age belief? Or do we have real evidence that extraterrestrials have been involved with our earthly civilizations for thousands of years? Join us on Aliens Explored as we discuss the phenomena of the Sky People.
Happy Thanksgiving to our American listeners here on Aliens Explored. I'm one of your hosts this week, Stu Jackson.
And I'm your other host, Neil Kelly.
And this week, I wanted to try and get it related to Thanksgiving in some way. So now, obviously, you'll know from the accents, we're British. But a lot of our listeners, most of our listeners are in America. So we wanted to do something a bit special for Thanksgiving. So this week we're discussing the Star People or Sky People legends of the Native Americans. So it might be a tenuous link, perhaps.
Yes, it is a tenuous link. There's also if you look on Wikipedia, the Star People, it comes up as a New Age belief.
Yes, there is that element to it, but it comes from the original Star People or Sky People as worshipped by the Native Americans.
Right, not the Association of Sky People, who are an association of aircraft cabin crew.
No. Are they the ones in the Mile High Club that I've heard about?
I don't know if that's a way into membership, but it's worth a try, isn't it?
Fantastic. So specifically, there's quite a lot. When I started digging away at the research, I'd heard this as part of Eric von Daniken's sort of ancient aliens theory, which, for any of our listeners who are perhaps unfamiliar with it, Eric von Daniken is an author who purported this idea that ancient civilizations like the Egyptians, the Sumerians, were guided by extraterrestrials posing as deities. So like Ra, the sun god in ancient Egyptian mythology, was actually an alien, and he taught the Egyptians a lot of technological things that have been lost to the ages. That's just one example, but it's what von Daniken is probably most famous for. I imagine that even yourself, Neil, you were familiar with von Daniken's ancient aliens theory, were you?
I'd certainly heard of it, and I'd certainly in books like Chariots of the Gods, where they hypothesize. Was it Arthur C. Clarke hypothesizes that some of the ancient Native American civilizations, the Mayans and the Aztecs and the Incas, their grand pyramids and their great boulevards that looked like runways, although probably the buildings that flanked it have long since gone, that they were built by extraterrestrials. Now there is a danger of straying into racist territory here. That effectively what you're saying is, well, there's no way the primitive Native Americans could have built something like this. This was built by, if it wasn't built by white men, then it was built by extraterrestrials, and that's kind of dodgy ground there. I don't want to get into that too much, denying the Aztecs and the Mayans and the Incas their civilization, the credit for their civilization.
That's a I've got to say that's not something that actually would have occurred to me. But just to go back on something you said, so Chariots of the Gods wasn't written by Arthur C. Clarke, it was written by von Däniken.
Von Däniken, of course.
It was his book. What Arthur C. Clarke famously said, and I might be misquoting slightly, but the gist of it is that to a primitive society, any sufficiently technologically advanced culture would seem like magic.
Well, it's almost a definition of magic that it's technology that we don't understand.
Yes.
Our smartphones would seem like magic to someone in the 19th century.
Absolutely. So that was where the Arthur C. Clarke thing comes in. It all plays in together, though. But no, the race. I don't know if I subscribe to the idea that a primitive culture being able to do technologically advanced things would be racist. I don't know, because a lot of cultures. We're not just talking about Native Americans or Egyptians. Here in Britain, Stonehenge is a perfect example. These great big, hundreds of tons of rock brought, what was it, 300 miles?
It was a huge distance, and they're discovering more things about it even to this day.
Yes,
than what it might have been for.
So in fact, I actually see it as almost a cultural connection rather than a divide.
And of course, what we've seen with colonialism from the 15th century to, I suppose, into the 20th century was the extermination of cultures around the world, in the Americas, in Africa. And they were just simply trampled on and superseded by a European culture that might have been superior in some ways, certainly superior enough to physically crush them, but maybe lacked understanding of certain things.
Indeed.
It's not that long since when Christians were saying, well, heaven, God is in heaven up in the sky. When people started, when humans developed the ability to fly, right from the Montgolfier brothers going up in a balloon, they had to kind of change the story. They said, well, I'm sure that I think I've read somewhere there were some Christians who feared that they would disturb God in his heaven by going up into the sky.
Absolutely. Getting slightly off topic there. So back to the Native Americans. So there's a few sort of standout events that I started reading about, but one I'm going to start with, which for me one of the biggest ones, which is down in Peru. You've got the Nazca Lines. So you've got these amazing drawings of different animals drawn in long straight lines that you can only actually make out when you're seen from above. Are you familiar with the Nazca Lines, Neil?
I've heard of it, yeah.
They are.
They've painted an aerial view that they couldn't possibly have had.
Basically, but you're talking about a huge thing here. Now, the ability to create straight lines, the ability to create art, absolutely. But why would they create something only to be seen from above?
Well, I guess that's what a map is, effectively, isn't it? If I draw you a diagram of, this is how you get from here to this place, and I say, well, you go along this path here, and you'll go past a forest on your left-hand side, and then you need to cross this river here, or you won't be able to cross it there, you need to go downstream a bit and cross there, and then effectively I'm drawing you an aerial view of the route you'll have to take.
Yes. But you can read a map from the ground.
Yeah.
The Nazca Lines, you can only really see from up above. I find that quite telling in of itself. And this whole idea of, you mentioned actually about gods, being up in the sky and being on clouds and all the rest of it. And that is a recurring theme over and over again. with many of these deities, including the star. Well, there's one element of the star people or sky people side of things. So there's a place called Mesa Verde, which was really amazing place that's been cut out of solid rock, entirely carved by a culture called the Anasazi, who just disappeared completely around the 13th century. You can still see elements of their culture today in tribes like the Hopi, but there's no real idea of where the Anasazi went. But the Anasazi, when they were building their structures, they repeatedly dug big holes called sapapu, that were allegedly where their deities came up from the ground. Their ancestors, not their deity. Well, ancestors and deities, same thing for them. Where they came up from the ground, from basically a different plane of existence. And with the Anasazi, one of the things that I find quite interesting, the Sumerian deities were called, or there were some Sumerian deities called the Anunnaki.
Right.
Who also came up from an underworld.
Okay, I mean, the Sumerians were, by definition, a bunch of arseholes, weren't they?
They were.
I mean, there was a story once about a Samaritan, or Samaritan as they call themselves, who did a good deed.
Yes.
And it was so remarkable that people are still talking about it thousands of years later. So
the Good Samaritan, absolutely. But the idea that these completely disparate societies had sort of similar histories for their deities, the root words are similar: Anasazi, Anunnaki. I find that quite compelling.
There is evidence that people in ancient times travelled more than we realise. I mean, the explorer Thor Heyerdahl, or scientist, believed that there was a physical link between the pyramids of Egypt and the pyramids of Central America, and set out to prove, using materials that would have been available to the Egyptians, to prove that you can travel on a raft and travel between the two. So that it is possible. It's
possible is one thing, likely is another.
I suppose we don't want to attribute something to an extraterrestrial presence at the expense of denying someone any credit for their own civilization. That's kind of it.
That's absolutely fair enough. So let's scratch away at the surface of that. You're talking about cross-cultural contamination.
Yes.
But you would see evidence of that in other ways. So, for example, us as Britons, you can see, because we've been invaded by so many other countries, Germanic countries, Swedish countries.
Who were Germanic? The Vikings were Germanic, and the Normans were Germanic originally. So
Nordic was the word I was looking for. But you can see evidence of all this. First of all, in our genetic structure, you see evidence of it physically in our skin colour, in our hair colour. Otherwise we'd all be very, very pale and red-headed.
Yeah.
And we're not. But you don't get these with these other cultures that you're talking about. There's no sharing of language. There's just really specific, oddly specific bits Whereas every time you look at the influence that the Romans had on the world, they travelled a lot. Every country they went to, they shaped quite dramatically.
Yeah, and I suppose that was in more modern times than, say, the Egyptians.
It was, but the fact that you can still see the Roman influence to this day so strongly suggests that it wouldn't die out that readily. That kind of cross-cultural contamination.
For our American listeners, we still do have Roman artifacts on our historical sites. If you go to the Tower of London, and you'll be told, well, the first part of it was the White Tower, which was built by William the Conqueror in around about 1070, shortly after the Norman conquest. But right next to it, there's a Roman wall that predates it by hundreds of years. At Dover Castle, built by Henry II in the 1100s, late 1100s. Well, yeah, the oldest building on that site is the Roman watchtower from 55 BC. So yeah, we do have a lot of Roman stuff around.
Indeed, and we're still finding it to this day. It was only a few years ago in Swindon, where I used to live, which is not that far from Bath, which was a major Roman town back in the day. They were developing a new housing estate, and all of a sudden all work had to stop because they discovered a Roman settlement. And underneath it all, they found this amazing mosaics and structures, and it's now a really significant Roman site that you can visit. So they're still finding it to this day.
Yeah, it's a real bugger for developers, isn't it? They're digging, they're bulldozing away, and suddenly they come across something. Oh, sorry, you've got to stop now and let the archaeologists in and put your project on hold.
Well, some areas like Bath, because it was such a significant place, you've got to do certain archaeological surveys before you can even think about developing. Swindon's a little bit further out from that, so you don't need to there, I don't believe.
Let's just clarify, where is Samaria now on the map? Which modern countries would it occupy?
It's around Iran, Iraq,
right?
That sort of area. So Middle East.
Well, Middle East Gulf. Because you've got Kurdistan, which doesn't really exist as a country, which occupies Iran, Iraq, Syria, Turkey. It just kind of overlaps on top of all those.
Certainly a hell of a distance from South America.
Absolutely, yeah. You would be a long time on your raft travelling that distance.
It'd be quite a journey.
Yeah.
Quite a journey.
Now, but this idea of the star people, that there was a New Age fringe theory, and which Brad Steiger introduced in his 1976 book, The Gods of Aquarius, argues that certain people originated as extraterrestrials and arrived on Earth through birth or as a walk-in to, or as a walk into an existing human body. They arrived and took someone over. Now, I suppose that's the origin of our deities. That would people would say, well, that was Jesus Christ. He was an extraterrestrial impregnated this woman, and she gave birth to someone who was far more than human. But what I find incredible is that Homo sapiens are a fairly recent arrival on this planet.
Yes, we are.
And we are very different from any other kind of animal. We have faculties that, we're the only animal that's aware of our own mortality, that can imagine things that aren't actually there. We have these other levels of consciousness. And apparently Homo sapiens coexisted for a while with their predecessors, Homo erectus. In fact, there are some people who say, well, that Homo erectus didn't evolve into Homo sapiens, that this new species just suddenly arrived. And pretty much, Homo erectus have been around for about 1 million years, the Neanderthal man. Very successful. They've been around much longer than we've been around.
Yeah.
Didn't make much progress, as we would see it. They were basically an ape. but the fact that they've been completely wiped out, and that even when you find a lost tribe in the deepest jungles of the Amazon or Papua New Guinea or these remote locations, they will be Homo sapiens. There's no trace of any of these,
yes,
of what have been replaced.
And that's your whole missing link theory as well, which is, you know, how did it get from one to the other?
Yeah.
There's no intermediary.
And how did it spread? And how did it spread so far? How did Homo sapiens, did they generate in these remote places, or did they travel from somewhere else to get to these remote places?
Well, that's whole other theory connected with extraterrestrials associated with that, which is basically we were transplanted from a different planet. I'm sure we will cover that in a future episode. So let's not go too far down that particular rabbit hole today. So coming back to the Anasazi then, and like I said, there are elements of the Anasazi culture that can be seen within the Hopi. Now, the Hopi specifically believe that their ancestors came from the Pleiades. Pleiades star system, which they call Chihukon.
So these people actually had an understanding of star systems.
Well, you look up into the sky, you can see stars.
Yeah, but did they have any kind of concept of how far away these stars were? Could they think in terms of light years travel?
Well, that's hard to say, but certainly they were seen as another place, and early Dakota legends as well talk of the Pleiades star system as being the abode of the ancestors. So they certainly looked up at the stars and saw them as another place, not just pinpricks in the curtain of night, or
which I mean, even some fairly recent literature, you can tell that the night sky is seen as that. It's these fairy lights in the sky.
Yeah, so the Hopi definitely saw it as another place. There's also petroglyphic evidence from the Hopi as well. There's quite a number of their cave paintings where they drew spirit beings. And please, listeners, forgive my pronunciations on any of this, but I think they call them kahinas. Now, a lot of these I'm just going to call them spirit beings, but a lot of them do really look like extraterrestrials in these cave paintings. Some of them look incredibly like what we now know, or what we call the grey alien, with the oval shaped face and the big almond shaped black eyes. So there's even depictions of those in cave paintings done by the Hopi.
Blimey.
That shut you up. No.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about.
It's something to ponder, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned earlier on about the technological achievements of these cultures, and just a quick word on that with the Anasazi. I mentioned Mesa Verde, which is an incredible site in of itself. They also built an astronomical observatory, ceremonial calendars, elaborate road systems. Absolutely incredible what they achieved. Like I say, and then suddenly, around the 13th century, poof, gone.
And no clue as to what might have happened to them.
Nope.
No. I mean, this will be before the arrival of any Europeans from the 13th century.
It would be, yes. But even then, if it was influenced from someone like the Europeans, there'd be records of that.
So I'm thinking of I keep thinking of the Mapamundi, which is it an 11th century document? Should look this stuff up before I start talking.
Mapamundi. What? Tell me about that.
It's an ancient map, which I think, well, it's a medieval map, which I think even in medieval times they knew it wasn't a reliable source of navigation. And it's more about myth than actual geography. And it shows the 3 continents of the known world of Africa and Asia and the north bit of Africa. And that's it. Now it's oriented with the Orient at the top of the map. Mm-hmm. So you go from the Far East all the way down to, from the Far East, that's where the Garden of Eden is. Mm-hmm. And then you travel all the way west down the map. On a normal map you'd be heading south, but in this case you're heading west until you get to the Gates of Hercules, which is the Straits of Gibraltar, and that was the limits kind of the known world. And there are all kinds of there are different versions of the map, but there are all kinds of different beings painted on there. There are people in Asia whose feet are so big that when it's hot they can lie on their backs and lift their legs up and shelter in the shade of their feet. There are people in Africa with no heads, that their face is actually in their body. There's a creature that will fart out fiery turds. You don't want to get behind it because it will set you on fire. There are sea serpents in the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean is in the Dutch, and the Germans still call it the Middle Land Sea. It was the sea kind of at the centre of the earth. Mm. Now they knew that the world was round, but they also believed, they knew it was a globe. They'd worked that out from basic geometry. They know that if you stand up high, you can see further. That's why you'd have a crow's nest at the top of a mast on a ship, because you can see further, and you can see a ship coming over the horizon. You see it's like it's rising out of the water because it's over they understood that the world was round. They weren't flat earthers, but they also believed that the further south you went, the hotter it got. So that's why there was only the north bit of Africa. They believed that a rhinoceros, they drew over a rhinoceros like it was a unicorn, but if you went too far south, eventually you would just catch fire. Which of course has a kind of truth in these days of climate crisis. Well, yeah. But they believe that's where hell was. That they believe that theoretically there were continents on the south of the planet to balance us out. Even I think even into the 18th and into the 17th century, they were still only philosophising about the existence of Australia and New Zealand. Right.
Interesting. Well, that might be one we can look at in the future. But
it's how our planet was, and obviously it was at the centre of the universe, and of course they were right about the moon going around the earth, but because the sun from a standpoint on the ground appeared to be doing the same, it was a long time before religious doctrine accepted that the earth goes around the sun and not the other way around.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so let's summarise on this one then. So the star people or sky people or Anusazi ancestors, what do you think, Neil? Were they extraterrestrials?
I think people have always believed in something coming from the heavens. I mean, I know we have, even Native Americans, they perform sky burials. I know that effectively just means leaving a body out to be eaten by vultures, but was there a belief that they will be taken off into the sky chunk by chunk of rotting flesh? And where did we come from? There's still the mystery of where we suddenly came from as Homo Sapiens. These advanced beings that supplanted, well, not just Homo erectus, but lots of other species as well.
So you give credence to this theory then, from the sound of it?
I don't know. There are mysteries, and ultimately we all come from stardust, don't we? We're a formulation of atoms. So, I don't know. I don't know if extraterrestrials are actually visiting this planet and living among us, or impregnating women and having babies with extra abilities. I don't know. I mean, I know I have read that traditional ufologists hate, really don't like the New Age star people.
Oh, the Steiger version. No,
The Steiger version, yeah.
That's been discredited many times. But this is more leaning towards the Eric von Daniken ancient alien theory, which I've got to say, I think holds a lot of water, especially when you see the parallels between totally disparate cultures following the same tracks. When you see the technological achievements of these primitive cultures, I can definitely see how an extraterrestrial or otherworldly interference can take place. I'm pretty convinced. But what about you, listener? What do you think? Is this all a load of tosh? Is it just the ramblings of people taking too many herbs? Or is it absolutely correct that indeed extraterrestrials have been interfering with us for thousands of years? Do write in and let us know by the usual methods. Don't forget to join us next time, though, when we will be discussing a very famous case, this one, Neil. Val Johnson police officer. The Val Johnson UFO case, where we have physical evidence of a UFO. So stick around for that one next week. In the meantime, happy Thanksgiving from me.
And happy Thanksgiving from me. You won fair and square on the...
That's Independence Day.
From a Brit, oh yeah, yeah, that's Independence Day. It shows how much we Brits know. But,
we don't do American history.
Belatedly for the 4th of July, you won fair and square.
Yeah.
But happy Thanksgiving.
Indeed. And in the meantime, keep watching those cave paintings and the skies. That's it from me. Take care for now.
And that's it from me. Until next time.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Aliens Explored is a Figo Films production in association with Juicy Falls. Music by hooksounds.com and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Facebook and Twitter or by visiting aliensexplored.com.